Good afternoon. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the noon town hall for conversations with Al McFarlane through the month of December. We're convening daily, 7 days a week, with elders, leaders, organizers, agitators, public servants, business owners, agency heads, to talk about how our communities are responding to the COVID-19 crisis. And what we've done, we've approached the Department of Health, asking them, suggesting that they support our initiative to communicate within our community, within our culture, to illuminate the great work that's being done by a variety of individuals and organizations. And the objective is that we need to change the narrative, to expand the conversation, that among other things, show ourselves, our people, to be the agents of change, that our thoughts and our decisions matter. We make a difference in how our community both embraces and responds to the challenge caused by COVID-19 and the mission of ensuring and growing equity in health, equity in other areas where there are great disparities right now. But the agency of building community is simply something that we must do and must reflect. So in that spirit, I've reached out to leaders in Minneapolis and St. Paul to talk about their particular work. I'm pleased to have Angela Myers and Tyrone Terrell. Angela Rose Myers is the president of the Minneapolis NAACP, and she's a research assistant to the director of the Roy Wilkins Center for Human Relations and Social Justice at University of Minnesota. After graduating with a bachelor's in arts from Barnard College, Columbia University in Africana Studies and Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies, she returned to her hometown here in Twin Cities to try to impact change on the local level. And she's a social justice advocate. She's an organizer and a researcher. Her goal is to create bridges between community members, elected officials, and experts in critical race theory. Angela, welcome. And before I turn to you, let me introduce my friend and colleague, lifelong friends almost, Tyrone Terrell. And Tyrone, you wear a number of hats. I sent a note in the chat to find out exactly which of those hats I should introduce, but you can correct me as we go. And I know that you do everything you do with just grit, integrity, and accountability. I always introduce you as one of the co-founders of the Men of March, Men Are Responsible for Creating Change. That was a group that organized the Million Man March delegation from Minnesota to the nation's capital almost, 20 years ago or so.
25, Al.
25 years. 25
Yeah.
years ago. And you have been a convener of the African American Leadership Council in St. Paul, and you've played a key role in education in Minneapolis with Harvest Prep, Harvest Best Academy, and a variety of other ventures as well. So Tyrone, good to see you. Tyrone, let me introduce you to my co-host on this program, somebody that you might know, you might not know, Brenda Gray. Is writing. She's an editor, writer, book author, but she and I were in the kindergarten together in Kansas City.
Is that right?
Yeah, Brenda Tyrone is from Kansas City as well.
Yeah,
so I'm sure we know some of the same people, the same family.
Take us all the way back.
That's right. That's right.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. Well, you're family now. If you're from KC and the Show Me State, then we're good to go.
I'm trying to get some Gates barbecue down here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm not
May I help you? You want to hear that? May I help you? Huh? May I help you? Real loud, right? You want to hear that? It's funny you say that. I just asked my cousins last night. They should send me a beef and a half overnight mail from Gates. So I just asked my cousins last night.
Isn't that something?
To do that. But I'll tell you a quick story, and she'll appreciate this. Me and my lady friend were dancing a couple of weeks ago, and a brother came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Y'all must be from KC, because only KC people dance like that." so he knew right away.
The Epicurean. Many weekends on the Epicurean line.
We're through. Well, Al, let me say something to you. I'm always happy to see Miss Myers because You know, that's Sam's daughter. So I am just thrilled. Congratulations on being the president. I know
So
you
explain that. You don't just say that's Sam's daughter. I was going to say it too, but let's go ahead and do the thing right and talk
yeah.
about who she is and who she brings, what she brings with her to this work.
Well, so I always so I look forward to meeting you getting this meeting that we've been talking about for a little while, and we're going to definitely do that because I want to support you 110% as president, and just to make your daddy mad that I'm supporting you no matter what you do, 110%. So, but anyway, no, Al, I'm thrilled to be here. So let's get it on, brother.
Okay. Well, Andrew, let's start with you. Mention who your father is. He's a world-renowned economist and leads the Roy Wilkins Institute. Talk about that first of all, and then let's go into the topic at hand, and that is how our community and agencies are responding to COVID-19. And I'm interested in what the NAACP is doing under contract with the state of Minnesota Health Department to address the question of COVID-19.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. And I will, talk about my dad a little bit. So Dr. Samuel Myers Jr., he is a graduate of MIT with his PhD in economics. He's actually the second person in my family to get their PhD in economics. My grandfather also was one of the first Black men to graduate with a PhD in economics from Harvard University in the early 1950s, late 1940s. So that is, that's the long line of big shoes to fill. My mom, Dr. Sheila Ards, also was doing a lot in this community before she got sick and retired a couple of years ago, but she's still very active in church, St. Peter Claver and St. Paul, still very active that way. So it's beautiful to come to have a family who is really invested in our community and, having those relationships that I've grown up essentially and seeing people in a different light. So, Mr. McFarlane, I grew up, hearing your name, always hearing, especially you, Mr. Terrell, like always hearing of you all. And then, now having come back from college, working in this space, it's fantastic. It's really so welcoming, and it's beautiful to see the strength of our community and the longevity of our community. And I think particularly these intergenerational conversations, that's kind of the crux of what we need, right? Like the young people were coming up, but there's a lot of things that we do need guidance on that we just don't know. There's particularly some, politicians who've been around for a while and still trying to throw the same, okey doke with us that they did with the previous generation. So it's good to know, and it's always fantastic to work with you all. So I am, so honored to serve in this position as the Minneapolis president, Minneapolis NAACP president, and the NAACP has been in Minneapolis since 1914, right? So being, again, after another legendary leader, Leslie Redmond, who was the youngest president to serve for us. And me, I'm coming in as, the second youngest, we were both 25 when we were elected. And so, keeping on in that tradition, but in continuing to build our relationships, and continuing to do the work that is needed. So when this COVID-19 pandemic really escalated here in Minnesota, one number of the things that the state did that they recognized was that our community needs the organizations on our community to have trusted information, right? And so NAACP is seen as one of these organizations where we can relay trusted information to our community. So, this is information that's coming straight from the state and straight from the researchers. This is not something that we're just Googling, or just finding on TikTok and Facebook and sharing. This is trusted information that we share on our social media sites that we're also trying to get other people who follow us or who, to share, reshare, and things like that. And then on the other end, we are distributing masks. So we do, recognize that there's still things that need to go on in the community, right? So I think COVID-19 has also shown the organizations, there are some organizations that can really live in this digital space, and they don't particularly need to be on the ground talking to community, but we are an organization that needs to live on the ground talking to community, and having physical events sometimes. But at those physical events, we give away masks. We make sure that people know face to face that, these are the precautions that need to be taken, because there are people in our community that don't have access to social media. There are people in our community that, even if they do have access to social media, just because of life, they're not on it often, or they're not watching the news. And so when we have things in our community, we also spread information, and we, give away masks, and, make sure people know the resources that are available to them.
What questions are you coming up against when people ask you about why? Do ordinary sisters and brothers get it about the expansiveness, the terminal consequences, and the nearness of this pandemic to us? Or is there still a pocket of disbelief? I know early on, I was at a meeting and some brothers came up and said, oh, you know what? Black people don't get COVID. That was like back in February, March. It was just now emerging, and it wasn't really on everybody's top of mind as it is now. But there are residual pockets of disbelief. And I think that's why you talk about having trusted, sources bring the information. But what are you discovering? What have you all discovered in the community?
No, I believe that community members, they do believe that COVID is real. I think at this point, particularly, most of the people that I've talked to, and then also me, myself, I know people personally, I've had family members who have gotten COVID, right? And that is also something that I'm hearing. A lot of people are experiencing a major loss this year, or they're experiencing a major scare, and so I think that people do recognize that COVID is real, but there's also that added level of your life. A lot of our community members, they still have to go physically into work, and there's things of navigating the COVID pandemic in our lives that, sometimes you just have to get that routine in of what you have to and need to do. And I think we're still getting to that space where it's not a well-oiled machine of everybody knows what they have to do, and they're sticking to the, the rules and regulations and the recommendations, particularly. But then also there are definitely, I think, where the information where we are going to be coming in is for the future is on the vaccine, because people really they don't know about this vaccine. There's still a lot of questions around this vaccine. And to be in a place where we are right now as a country, it's looking like this vaccine is going to be coming out very soon. It's going to be,
today. They're doing it today.
To date. So, it's scary to be in a space where so many people don't know and have a lot of questions around the vaccine, but the vaccine's out. People are going to be taking this vaccine. So we should get that information out as quickly as possible. And that's what we're going to be working on.
Tyrone, what are you hearing in community, and any particular role that you're playing or any of the organizations you're with in response to and supporting the state's initiative to make sure that state initiatives are inclusive, reflect equity, and reflect the diversity of our presence here?
Yeah, Al. I mean, we're doing a couple of things. Actually, the shirt I got on Dave, Guns Down, is a coalition of New Salem, Stair Step, Spice Group, Uhuru, Mother's Love, about 10 Black organizations that are giving out masks, 8 to 12 Truth Center over in St. Paul. So a number of organizations, about 10 of us that are working together to get the word out, particularly even dealing with young men and young women in our community that are not doing some of the things we want them to do, but they still are at risk for it. And COVID is real. I had it in March for 4 weeks. It was ugly 4 weeks. And so
are you immune now? You're immune now, you think, or do you know?
Well, I'm immune to the point I haven't gotten it again. But until now, I was on a call with my Men of March guys, the guys that went to the Million Man March, and they were saying, well, brother, we don't get it. When I finally said, well, your president had it. And they all changed immediately. And then they were mad because I didn't tell them, but when you go into the hospital with COVID, nobody can go with you. Your family members can't visit. So it's almost your own lockdown. So I didn't even tell people the 4 or 5 months ago. I mean, I didn't tell Spike, Rev McAfee, they got mad at me. And they said, well, brother, that's not right. But I'm telling you, I didn't tell my own children or my siblings because only my girlfriend knew. And even when she took me to the hospital, they said, okay, you can't come in. You know, so she got cut off right at the door. And so it is, trust me, it's real. When you have 105-degree temperature for 5 or 6 days, I was on fire, Al. And
were you hospitalized or just treated and left in home?
no, 4 days in United.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. You kept it a good secret. I didn't know. So
well, yeah, brother, I didn't. My point to her was nobody could do anything.
Right.
I mean, so it's one of those things where. But what was amazing, I got 2 IVs in both hands, and 2 weeks later, brother, I was done. And I was on the tennis court 2 weeks later. And so, but it's real for anybody who doesn't think it is. And I tell people now that it's real. So we're doing a lot of things in terms of educating young people. I mean, the mask, people say, well, masks really don't work. Wear it anyway. Kind of like my mother used to say when I asked her one time, Mama, what happens if you find out that God don't exist, Jesus don't exist? She said, I don't care. I've lived my life treating people good. And so I'm still okay with it. Wear the mask, treat yourself good because it's helping you. And so our thing is to try and talk to as many, particularly young people. This recent thing showed that 18 to 40 people were 72, 75% of the cases. Because they're still partying, they're still doing stuff without masks. And you have to kind of just shut it down. I mean, my daughter had her 35th birthday the other day, and we done it all by Zoom from Kansas City to here. Everybody, 25, 30 of us was on a call. We still had a birthday party. We did it by Zoom. And I took her stuff, I dropped off at the front door of her house, kept going. And so you just have to treat this thing. It's going to be around for a while. People think all of a sudden it's going to disappear. This thing is not going anywhere. And so we need to take all the precautions, but we need more help from the Minnesota Department of Health and others. Put as much resources in terms of information, KMOJ, Insight, the spokesman, the recorder, all that, as much information as possible to our community. We cannot end up ignoring it. Somebody showed me a thing that of the 35 infants that have died from COVID, 22 of them were Black.
I didn't know that. That's new information for me.
Where'd
you see that?
I don't even remember, Al, where I got that from. But somebody called me about the number of infants that were dying from COVID, but most of them, majority of them, 22 out of 30 something was Black.
Okay.
Let me find where
yeah, let's check that out.
And it doesn't surprise me when you talk about healthcare, because most people's healthcare come from a job. So if you don't have a job that gives you good health care, most folks, and Sister Angela said something about, can I miss 14 days from work? If I got one of those jobs that says I can't miss, some people, even if they tested positive, they're going to go to work, don't tell nobody, because I got a family to feed. And then the other part of this deal for me has been distant learning that has set our children back. Brother, we've got Black children in St. Paul alone. They say 40% of the seniors won't graduate this year from high school. Okay, 80% of that 40% is Black. And so the school district has reached out to the African American Leadership Council and others to say, can you go and help a senior now, get those 2 or 3 classes done so they can at least have a chance? Because most people say, well, later on, go get my GED. Brother, GED costs you $450 now to get. You can't just go in and pay $100 and take the whole test. They got it segmented now for English, $150, math, $150, you know, so, and who's going to have $500 just sitting around? Most people say, well, I'll do it later.
Never get done.
Anybody who's trying to do 8th grade algebra now, you know what I'm talking about? When my kids were in high school, I had to hire Dr. Lisa Clarkson to get my daughters through trig and calculus because you don't have that skill as a parent. And so many of our parents don't have it. So this thing has set our kids back academically.
Mhm.
If I had a second or third grader right now, I'd make them take the grade over next year, no matter what anybody said.
Hmm.
And you know Mary Kay Boyd from St. Paul.
Yeah.
Sister Mary Kay said we should adopt the Montessori concept.
Mhm.
People back in school, but don't worry about what grade.
Right.
Don't make them feel stigmatized that I'm second grade, but I'm back in first grade.
Mhm.
Let me learn and catch up and move on. So anyway, brother, this thing is real. The distant learning is going to cost our community big time in terms of academically. It's if you don't have two parents at home or one parent at home that can help navigate this thing, because kids are turning their iPad or Chromebook on, but they're not doing anything. And you only have to be on, I think the law requires you 30 minutes.
Mhm.
For 30 minutes or whatever it is, 15 minutes,
Mhm.
you're good to go. That's crazy.
Mhm.
And so it's going to hurt our young people more than anybody else. So let me stop there.
Well, no, that's a good beginning, and I want to take off from there to talk about, again, this impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, but you also bearing witness to the other pandemic. The other pandemic is the pandemic of 1619, and that is precisely the mission of the NAACP, Angela Myers, to address the question of systemic, racism, the problem of white supremacist thought and white power, and how it has been a destructive force in against our people, but also against humanity. And so I ask people to draw the line between the impact of COVID-19 and the impact of the 1619 pandemic, because what you described, Tyrone Terrell, is how these structural inequities simply set us up for further degradation, risk, and hurt as a people. What do you think about that, Angela?
No, I definitely agree that the structural inequities have been amplified. There was a question. So Zora Neale Hurston once said, there are some years that ask questions and there's some years that answer those questions. So during the Obama era, the question was, well, is racism over? Are we in a post-racist society? And we're seeing right now that even though, even last year, the stock market was booming, things like that. These are economic indicators of wealth and growth, or that even last year they said that, more minority-owned businesses were being started than ever before in 2019, right? We are seeing now that those, economic indicators of growth don't actually fully apply sometimes when there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, we're the ones who are hurting the most. Mm-hmm. And so that shows that, some of these things of the growth and the progress that we saw during the Obama era and more recently, those are superficial. We weren't actually getting to the real root of some of these issues. And the real root of these issues is structural racism, which is something that people don't, they don't want to say. They want to say that racism really only impacts us when there's a KKK outside. That is not true. Racism impacts us every day. It impacts small business owners when they're trying to get capital to start their business. So what have we done? Black people, we've gone to Kickstarter. We started raising funds on Instagram and GoFundMe. We are going around traditional systems in order to get funds right now because we need to. We have always been a people, when we were enslaved and we had, pig feet and pig ears, we made food, like when we had the scraps, we made gumbo. So right now we're doing that as well, but you can't say that that's progress, because the institutions that we need to rely on are failing us. So we have to go outside of these systems right now. So let's build up and relook at these systems and these institutions and say, some of this progress that you're seeing with, Black people, they are right now. Some Black people are doing well, but a lot are not. You can't just look at the Robert Smiths and the Obamas and say that's progress. You can't even just look at me and say that that's progress because I went to an Ivy League institution. I am not representative of, the whole Black community. But when we are in these places of power, or when we have benefited, from our privileges, I can't lose that. It's not the time in our nation's history to be bougie. It's not the time to just say, okay, I've gotten my degree. That means I've helped our race and that's it. No, I have to be listening to people. I have to be in our community. We have to do that work. And that's also the reflection of the NAACP, because for a long time, even the NAACP was, a bourgeoisie, Black middle class institution. Right. It was a Black, there was a lot of people who had good jobs who were in the NAACP. Now we're more reflective of our communities and being in our community.
Tyrone, one of the things that Angela said was that the institutions have failed us. Great observation, but let me put the question to you this way. The institutions have failed us, but have they failed their intent? I mean, the question is, are they doing what they intended to do? And my answer is that their intention was suppression of Black and brown bodies. So what do you think?
Oh, I definitely agree with that, brother. I mean, the intent of institutions, and you look at, and we were just having a conversation about the Black farmers, the Pickford cases that were, when Black farmers were denied loans or given loans at such a high rate they couldn't pay them. So then the bank came in and took their land and gave to white farmers. And so the intent was always to do exactly what, none of these systems. And one thing the men of March hate when I say this, the two worst things that happen to Black people in this country is Brown versus Board of Education case, because when we lost the right to have the Black schools, and sent all of our students to white schools. They didn't take the principals, they didn't take the teachers, they didn't take the janitors, they didn't take the cooks. So everybody else lost their jobs. All they took was the children. And so we became more European. And I tell folks all the time, me and Spike Moss are more European than we are people. No, you guys are the Black militant guys of the town. No, we are so educated that television, is a weapon. It's a secret weapon. And so it programs you. And I tell Somali, I tell Hmongs, they got probably 20 more years to have culture and things in place, because their kids are drinking, smoking, not wearing hijab, not going to the mosque. And Hmongs will tell you in a minute, we cook two foods at home now. We cook for mama, traditional Hmong food, for our children, hamburgers, French fries. They want McDonald's. So the more they become westernized and become Europeans, then all that other stuff is going to fall away. So what we did when we lost the right to educate our children, and there's a school in St. Paul called the Salam School, which is a school of about 400 Jewish boys from around America. And all they teach them how to do is be Jewish leaders, Jewish religion, and they said they train them to be Jewish leaders. We no longer train our children to be respectful of religion, culture. Our whole gang thing right now is a culture problem. It's a religious problem. It's a spirituality problem. It's a morality problem. And then when you put poverty with that, bro, these kids came out of the mother's womb with no chance. No chance at all. And Angela's a part of Jack and Jill when my kids was in. Jack and Jill, all those babies gonna do well. Every parent there is gonna make sure those babies have what they need. They all come from six-figure income or higher, so the playing field's level for them. But we have so many children. I was in Rush City Prison right before the pandemic, and when I walked in the gym, there was 500 brothers in that gym. And on the front row, there had been 10 rows of 50. There were 15 guys the same age as my 29-year-old son. And the only difference between my son and those boys sitting there is me and his mother. flip-flop them, put my son in their culture, their environment, and you got the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And last time I checked with Kansas City, our hometown, bro, we're over 200 shot in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading some of the names, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds. Bro, that should not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lost control. And then when you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says now you can go into a white restaurant, a white hotel, a white bar, a white funeral home. Estes and Brooks should be millionaires 10 times over. But we will immediately have, when we got money, we go to the white funeral home. When we ain't got money, we say, Estes, come on, do something for us. Brooks, can you bury him free and we'll pay you on a payment plan? And so and I don't blame Dr. King, you know, I love, you can see behind me, I love Dr. King, so I don't blame this architect of the civil rights movement, but nobody should have talked to a Dr. Sam Myers or somebody and said, what's gonna be the economic impact of integration? What's gonna be the economic impact of us integrating our schools? Because we don't wanna buy black folks things. You remember John James, he used to always say one thing,
mm-hmm.
The white man's ice is colder than the black man. That's our mentality. Mm-hmm. We think it's ice, but if the white man's got ice, his ice is gonna be colder than ours. And then we have some black folks, if there ain't no back door, we'll cut one, we'll make one. We're trained to come in the back door. And we can't have that mentality. And so understanding the impact of Brown versus Board of Education and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, they changed the landscape for black folks. As Brother Milford says all the time, he went to the March on Washington saying black power and I'm black and I'm proud, and left there as a minority. The Dr. King, all the speakers at that march, August 28, 1963, all talked about minority, minority, minority. And so we were no longer in the black power, we were in the being a minority. And this new thing, what they call it, PIOC or BIOC, you know. Bro, we just let them put a label on us. That's why the Native Americans said, don't include us in that. We are indigenous people. We ain't no minority. Mm-hmm. Don't include us in that. So
the question, Tyrone, this brings back to COVID-19 and organizations like the NAACP, like Insight News, KMOJ, like Phyllis Wheatley Community Center, like Hallie Q. Brown, institutions in our community. What ought we be both expecting and demanding in terms of resourcing these organizations to tell our own story, to analyze both the problem and to project, scenarios and solutions for our community that are believable, that are also vested in the work that we can provide as part of the solution? I think we should be with intent telling the state of Minnesota, Ramsey County, St. Paul City Government, Hennepin County, Minneapolis City Government, and the suburban governments that you simply must ensure that the revenue streams associated with COVID-19 by intent engage voices, professionals, delivery systems, institutions in our community. What do you think about that?
Al, I agree 110% that there's no reason why we're not getting, if you look at the populations of particularly St. Paul and Minneapolis, that are almost 50% minority now, but we're getting probably 1-2%, if that, of the money being given out by the state, Ramsey County, Hennepin County. And so there's no question, we need to have as much education as possible for our young people and for our community. Because if we don't, this thing is not going away. And so the more that we can put in front of young people, whether it's through rap, dance, spoken word, I don't care how we do it, whatever media they will listen to, we need to make sure they are listening and getting what's needed, including that nobody wants to take the shot, but you better take it because, and I've heard all the stories about, well, brother, they're going to plant something in it that's going to track us. Brother, I've always said they probably put that in the back of our head when we was born. Mechanism right from the hospital.
That's right.
First of all, this thing right here, this cell phone.
Yep. You're being tracked.
If you got one of these, they got you.
That's right.
You've gotten text messages from people that don't have your number, who say vote for this law, this bill, this senator. So if you got one of these, and majority of the homicides in the Twin Cities are solved because of these
Mm-hmm.
social media. So you already tracked, unless you don't have one of these. If you got cable TV, you being tracked. You got any kind of computer, you being tracked.
Mm-hmm.
So no.
So just live your life the right way. That's number one. That's answer number one.
Brother, live it the right way, or
and get the shot.
Or be prepared for the consequences. That's what I tell people.
Angela, jump in here again. My argument is that we have to tell the health department and the governor's office and the county commissioners and city councils that you simply must invest in assets, programs, ideas, thoughts in our community, and that we ought to be able to articulate the number. If we're 20% of the population or 40% of the population, 40% of the revenue associated with that problem solving ought to be streaming through our community. What do you think, Angela Myers?
No, I definitely agree. And I agree also to the extent where it has to be a two-way street, right? This is not just the state of Minnesota telling the NAACP, this is the information, go out and tell people. We need to also be talking back, right? And so saying, well, this information, we cannot dumb down this information for our community. People have a right and deserve to know exactly what is in this vaccine. Who are the researchers that did this? Where did the funding come from? Who's Pfizer? Who even in our government has invested in Pfizer? Because, to the extent one of the major senators of the U.S., Senate, she invested in Pfizer early on in the COVID pandemic. That's something to know. That is just something to know. And this is public information. Yet also we need to look at holding the social media, corporations accountable. Just because it's on Facebook or you see it on Facebook doesn't mean that it's true. Just because it's on TikTok doesn't mean that it's true. And actually how TikTok and Facebook work, they are not pushing forward valid information, because when it's a joke or when something, has the potential to get a lot of clicks and views, that's what they push forward, because that's how they're able to monetize other people, how they're able to monetize the work and get you to spend hours and hours and hours on Facebook. If they keep showing you funny tweets on Twitter, that's how they keep you on Twitter. So that doesn't prioritize the facts. And there are algorithms, very sophisticated algorithms that benefit actually disinformation and misinformation rather than true information. Mm-hmm. And so being on these social media sites, make sure if you see something that doesn't really pass the sniff test, you said, I never really heard that, COVID is from these 5G cell phone towers. Let me look that one up.
Right.
That's exactly what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And we're here on these social media sites trying to promote the real trusted information, mm-hmm. not the misinformation. And so if you see something also that's funny, right? Like the vaccine is them putting, a tracker chip in us. That's hilarious, when you're reading it. But when you share that, there's someone who's going to believe it, right? Who mm-hmm. might not understand that this was a joke. You were just saying, mm-hmm. People were just saying that as a joke. Mm-hmm. And with the history of, these tracking movies, all of that type of stuff. Most of the people who say these things are joking, or they're like Russian bots, mm-hmm. and that's the world that we're living in on social media. So we have to be diligent about where we're trusting our information. Just because it's on Facebook doesn't mean that it's true. Just because even somebody sent you something via Facebook message. So I had gotten earlier in the COVID pandemic a lot of Facebook messages from my aunties, from my relatives and friends that was, spreading misinformation, and not just ignoring that, but taking that time to look it up. Mm-hmm. Going back to, Aunt Sally, Aunt Nellie, and mm-hmm. saying, this is not real. This is not true. And going back and saying that, at the end of the day, people are going to believe whatever they want to believe. But as long as you let them know,
you've done your part.
The real information.
Mm-hmm. Listen, this has been a great conversation. I want to thank both of you, Angela Myers and Tyrone Terrell, for being here today, but also for the work that you do. This is streaming live to YouTube, and from there going to Facebook, on social media. Brenda Lyle Gray is on the call with me as co-host every day, is writing stories about these conversations. And our objective is to raise your voices, to lift up the ideas and the interests of our people, to tell the public and to tell the state of Minnesota that this kind of conversation is absolutely necessary, essential, that we need and we must have the ability to examine, explain, analyze what is happening in the world from the point of view of our culture, history, and from the point of view of our interests. And you all are on the front line. We thank you so very much. Tyrone, any final word before we close out here? Any project you're working on you want people to be involved in? And same with you, Angela, anything that you want people to volunteer for or to do to support the NAACP? Tyrone?
I'm going to let Angela go first, brother. I'm just happy to be on here with her, brothers. I'm letting her go first, brother.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, so we are having an upcoming Christmas dinner giveaway outside of Sammy's Avenue Eatery. So if you would like to volunteer to, help promote first COVID safe meal, getting meal kits together, and then also COVID safe volunteering. That's what we're going to be doing in, I guess, right before Christmas. So just, I guess, next week.
Yeah, so fast. Yeah.
So you can email president at mplsnaacp.org if you would want to volunteer for that. And also if you want to become a member of the NAACP, you can go to naacp.org/membership. And that is $30 a year to be a regular member of the NAACP, where you get to vote on, the things that we do, the programs that we have, and also the policies that we are presenting and pushing toward for our community. So, even these conversations around policing and COVID-19 public health policies, if this is something that you're interested in knowing more about, and then also in voicing your opinion, come join the NAACP and you get a say.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much. Tyrone, thank you, brother.
No, I want to just support what she just said, because every Black person should have an NAACP card.
Mm-hmm.
$30 a year. I took out a life membership because I just want to get that and get it done and over with. But I just think that Black folks have a responsibility and to do that. We owe that to our ancestors. We owe it to our, so it's not about, if you don't even get involved, pay the $30. My good friend, Leon Russell, who's the national chair, who used to be the human rights director from Pinellas County, Florida. So I stay in close contact with Leon because we served 14 years together when I was human rights director for St. Paul. And so the national NAACP or your local chapter branch, get involved. I mean, you have a responsibility. It's not always about you. I tell people all the time, the folk that laid the framework for the NAACP were looking out for the next generations of Black people. We have a responsibility to look out for the next generations of Black people. And so, and I'll get in contact with you because I may have some of my Men of March guys coming up with the holiday thing you're doing, because Hallie Q. Brown does the same thing this Saturday from 9 to 1. Probably going to end up about 900 families will get taken care of. And so, but the NAACP is also in St. Paul connected to that. So it's just great work that I always say this time of year, from Thanksgiving to New Year's Day, folks are nice, and they go back to being ugly January 1st. But folks seem to be a little nicer for about 6 weeks. And so we should take advantage of that. But no, brother, that's what I'm doing, is trying to help as many people during this tough time, but also dealing with this shirt, I got guns down, is trying to get these young people to put these guns down. That, but no child's born with a pistol in their hand. I don't care who, even the shooter didn't have a chance. So many times we have to get with these young people and try and talk to them about a different way to settle something besides picking up a gun and shooting somebody over, you disrespected me. You know what I'm talking about? So we've got now, between the two cities, 112 dead over 600 shot, and 90% of those are us, black on black. So even when I wear this hat, which is about George Floyd, it's really when people talk to me about it, I don't really want to talk about George Floyd. Let's talk about the 111 that are us killing us.
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd was a murder. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 111 other murders in our community. And think about it, brother, we've got second and third graders coming, just as violent, who will kill in the next 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have the coronavirus, that epidemic in our community, that pandemic in our community, but we have another one, that the 25,000 pound pink elephant that walks around the north side in St. Paul, that we all want to ignore it, and we can't. There's a greater chance of this young sister at 25, she can't go to a house party, she can't go to a club, because the chance of something happening is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of us are in this situation of, we can't ignore it, Al. We as a black community can't think that the police, the government are going to get us out of this thing with our community. We as black people have to do it. And as long as we say it's okay to shoot and kill, it's going to continue. So.
No, I definitely agree. This summer I had, I spoke at Nia Black's funeral. And Nia Black was a young woman who was my age, just younger, a year younger than me, who was murdered at a club, this summer. And it was essentially, something where at first they had 60 camera recording phones on, right? But nobody had stepped forward. And so at a certain point as well, there needs to be accountability, and also the bravery and courage in our community to choose love and to choose compassion and the truth and to put the guns down. I agree.
Thank you.
Listen, Tyrone and Angela, thank you so very much. Keep up the good work. If you're listening to this on YouTube, like it and want to grow the channel, share it with your friends. If you're checking us on Facebook, thank you for being a part of it. Ask questions, do a watch party, share the conversation. We're doing this every day, 7 days a week between now and the 31st of December. Thanks to the Minnesota Department of Health for enabling this. We hope to be able to do this beyond the end of December, because we know the critical part coming up is how we embrace, utilize the vaccination and other therapies. And our people, our communities, black and brown, at greater risk. We need to just be informed, knowledgeable, and persistent in making sure that we protect ourselves by understanding and making informed decisions about the vaccine. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next.
I'll say one thing real quick.
Go ahead, yeah.
I think, and I'll get with Angela and other folks, but I think not you, not Insight, not KMOJ, we need to go as leaders of black organizations to the Department of Health, to the governor, and make the demand for you. You shouldn't even have to do it. That our community has a right to have that opportunity, to have that economic infusion of money into our community that gets the word out, not just on this.
On a variety of things.
On a variety of things that we don't get the right economic injection in our community, into our finance thing. So we need to make that happen. But I think if we go collectively from both cities, make that demand together, and with the Black Ministry Alliance, with the NAACP, African American Leadership Council, and others, collectively make the demand. We keep getting shortcutted on this thing, and part of it's our fault. Part of it's our fault. Because squeaky wheel still gets the grease. And we make the demand. We talk to our representatives, talk to Senator Champion and others, that we want that audience to make that demand for our community. We need that. Otherwise, we're going to have, and I was just on a call quick and talking about COVID, of the number of folks in the workhouses that are getting COVID.
Yep.
And so in the prison, so well, they're prisoners. No, they still have a right to health care. They still have a right, serve their time for their crime. COVID's not part of their crime.
Great.
And so
not part of the sentence. Nope.
I'll talk to some folks over here, Andrew, I'll get in touch with you, but we need to do an effort from us. Maybe having a meeting with you, Al, and others in terms of make sure we're framing it correctly and how you want it done. But we fight that fight for you. You know, your job is for us to get you the resource to continue to do this, to continue to educate and inform our community. So thank you, brother.
Thank you all. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice meeting both of you.